All right. Can everybody see the presentation?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Yep.
Why is it not doing? There we go. All right. So as I said, my name is Aaron Statz. I am the compliance coordinator with Student Financial Services. This course program of study that we've been talking to you guys for a little over a year now is a collaborative effort between the Office of the Provost, the University Registrar's Office, and Student Financial Services. The purpose of this program is that Sandra Bennett started talking about this about 5 years ago, back in 2016. She has a knack for seeing long-term problems, and I think she kind of saw this one coming down the pike. Course program of study is simply, if you try to look that up in the regulations, as I did when I first started in my position as a compliance coordinator a little over a year ago, you won't find it anywhere in the regulations. But the Higher Education Act does contain verbiage that basically says that for Title IV aid for a student to be eligible for Title IV aid, that it basically 3%. So as I said, Sandra started talking about this about 5 years ago. She put together a team led by Eric Meadows and Ellen Harker. Eric, of course, is the AD at our Health Science Center, and I'm sure most of you know him. Ellen is a professional technologist in our Strategic Operations Unit. She does a lot of behind the scenes work for Student Financial Services. So they've been leading this collaborative team within SFS for a number of years, and then they've been working with some personnel in the Registrar's Office and the Provost's Office to get this course program of study to where we're at now. We started this process years ago. I think if most of you guys are familiar with one of the first steps, which would have been the degree audits that came out several years ago, in which we were trying to measure where some of our senior students were at. So students within a certain guideline or certain percentage of hours to graduation, we would send out these degree audits, and you guys would have to fill them out, and then we would package them accordingly. So that was our first foray into the course program of study. We began talking to the colleges and the different units in late 2019, I believe. And then we were in the process of, and that was phase one. I think we started maybe in September of 2019, and we came out and introduced this concept to you guys. We came back to you in the winter of early 20, and we were in the process of doing this, I think, when everything got turned around and we went from face-to-face meetings to remote meetings. And we told you then that we were going to come back and talk to you again. And so that's where we're at now, is in phase 3 of this program. So we've been to most of the colleges. This may be our last presentation. I'm sure a lot of you guys have already heard this presentation. We did present to AAC last week, and we came back because some of the members weren't able to be there. So we wanted to make sure that we get everybody. Hopefully some of you that have heard this, that maybe didn't have questions to ask in the past or at your collegiate meetings, that you maybe have some questions that you feel more comfortable with bringing forth now. And we certainly encourage that. As we've said, you know, the first 2 phases we talked about what course program of study is. We've defined degree percent coursework. I think probably the biggest thing out of phase 1 and phase 2, and with collaboration through the Registrar's Office, is in defining degree percent coursework. Obviously, in Student Financial Services, we're not the experts, and we've never claimed to be. We knew from the get-go that would be the hardest part on our end, was defining what was degree percent courses, and that would have to come from the Registrar's Office working with the different colleges. I think we've added a lot to it, and you'll see that we've came up with some stuff that helps clear some of the degree percent courses later in the program. But I think we've really got a good grasp now on pretty much what the degree percent coursework is. Today, we're going to talk to you a little bit about what is changing that have come about from those previous meetings, what aid is impacted. We're really going to talk to you about the communication to the advisors and to the students. And when we say advisors, what we really mean is the point of contact at the colleges, because each one sets it a little bit different. And so it's the we're going to communicate with the points of contact, and then they'll disperse these communications to the personnel that need to on the collegiate level. But then we're going to talk about our communications and how we've adjusted those. And we're going to talk about overriding courses that are not counting as degree percent courses. So we've got some updates on some of the screens and stuff. We've talked in philosophy in the past about how to do this. Today, we're going to show you some of the screens that allow you to do this. I think one of the first things that came out, and we told you in phase 2 that this was going to be coming to you, but a lot of the questions that we got was that advisors don't even know if students receive financial aid. Unfortunately, this came about, I think, probably at a majority of the colleges. We were asked if someone at the college or advisors could have access to financial aid. And as we've explained, unfortunately, due to FERPA laws, we cannot allow that. But what we did do, and what came about through the registrar's office, was they were able to go into DegreeWorks and put this financial aid indicator in the DegreeWorks. Now, this is for the current semester only, and it's only for offered or accepted aid. So if a student had aid in the past, this is not going to read this. If they haven't had aid offered to them, it's not going to read that. But if they've been offered an award for state or federal aid only, not for institutional aid, but for state or federal aid only, if they've been offered or accepted an award, you'll be able to see that they are an aid recipient. At that point, if a student wants to show you their financial aid award and talk about what aid is impacted, which we'll discuss a little bit later in this presentation, they can do that. But for the communication from our office to the colleges to allow you to understand that they are an aid recipient is completed through this tab in DegreeWorks. I think that should make your all's life a little bit easier. If a student comes in and says, well, I don't even think I got financial aid because all I have is loans. You can look on there and see that they are aid recipients. Another one of the things that you're going to be able to see through the STAR system that Eric and Ellen and this team has worked with IT to develop is some audit tabs. So we have, in collaboration with IT, we've developed audit tabs that will basically allow advisors and students to know where they're at in the process. Now, for advisors, we've adjusted the messaging with some additional disclaimers and links to references for CPoS. Many of those references are going to go to our website that's in development, and we'll see a snapshot of that a little later in the presentation. And then you're going to get some of the communications. This is where you'll initially be able to see your communications. So if you're not a point of contact and you have a student who asked a question about CPoS and you may not have access to the banner screen, you will be able to see it in here in the audit tab. We do want you to know that this will not go live for you guys until March 15th. And then the only way you're going to see it for a student is if they are registered for courses and we have ran the CPoS process on them. So if a student's not registered for courses and we have not run CPoS on them, if you go to their audit tab in STAR, you're not going to see anything for them. Again, this will be available to you on March 15th. I think students start registering on March 16th. So hopefully you can see it pretty quick. I know Ellen's going to be running the process once we start having students register. From the student side, the messaging that they're going to see in their audit tab has been scaled back. Initially, we were working with other colleges that run course program of study, some in the Big 12, some outside of the Big 12. We talked to some other colleges, and they talked about sending communications to the students early and often. And that was kind of the process we started with. And as we progressed through this over the past year, we realized that at times could create some confusion with the students. So we've scaled that back. One of the things we did is the red box that's in banner or in the audit, that the student may have seen. We've gotten rid of those because we know that sometimes, they see that and they automatically think something's wrong. And instead of reading what is wrong, they'll immediately call the hub or go to their advisor to try to find out. Another part of this is that a student's not going to receive a communication unless their aid is impacted by the degree percent courses. So if we have a student that's not enrolled in full-time hours, but their aid's not impacted, they're not going to receive a message. You're not going to receive anything on them. And again, we'll go into a little detail on this a little later on. From the student's perspective, this is not going to be available to them until March 30th. But there may be some that stumble upon this. The majority of them won't know their aid's impacted unless they receive an email, and that's going to be pretty late in the process for them. One of the things that we really want to point out for this audit tab is that this was not the vision that Eric and Ellen and some of the others had for the final version of our audit tab. But there were some constrictions with working with IT that couldn't get done in time. So for the 2022-23 year, we do anticipate some additional customization for students, but right now we just wanted to get a message out to them so that if they do come across it, or if they do have a question and they understand where this is at, they can see what that question is. One of the things that the students will be able to see, this will be their view. So when they go in and into this audit tab, this is what they're going to see, and they're going to see whether the aid counts. And if, let me see, is this, yeah, whether the aid counts toward their program and in their, and I'm sorry, whether the courses count toward their program or in their financial aid calculation. And if it's all yeses, then they're fine. If it doesn't count, but they're in 12-degree pursuant course hours, they're fine. If their aid's not impacted, they're fine. At any rate, this is really not going to tell them. We're not going to flag them with a red box here and tell them that their aid is not impacted. This is just a snapshot of where they are. For the advisor's view, this is the first screen you guys are going to see. And so the blue box is going to say that the students reach full-time status in degree pursuant coursework and does not need to make any changes to reach full-time aid eligibility. So if you have a student that comes in your office and you're talking to them and they ask about this, because the messages are going to go out, if they ask about course program of study, this is where you can go to. So you get into their STAR count. If you see this and you see the blue message, everything's fine. Obviously we tell them that if they change courses, this is for the current courses only, but if they change courses, it could change their enrollment standards for aid and direct them to the website. But by and large, if you see the blue screen, they're good. The other screen that the advisors will be able to see is when the student has not reached full-time aid eligibility. And what we do in this one is we just, we let you know that something classes marked no and count for aid column are currently not considered degrees and therefore not included in calculating the student's financial aid eligibility. And so as you go through this is where you'll need to talk to the student and have them look at the courses they're taking and work with them to make sure that they are in degree pursuant courses. Now, there is a possibility that you guys could see this before the communications to the colleges go out. Basically, what our hope is that if this is in red, that once the message is sent to the college, that you guys can make the exception and override the bulk of them. And that the students will never really see any negative message, well, not negative, never see any message that their courses are not degree pursuant. But this is just a snapshot of where they're at the current day when you look at this, and it'll give you an idea of where the students are. Again, we're looking to update this next year, but for now, this is what you're going to see, and this is the audit screen that will be available on March 15th. We've already worked with the colleges. We've already talked about overriding authority. I think some reports were sent out in January to each of the college contacts, and you were able to review and determine if a course should have counted toward a student's degree or not. In that sample, you had the ability to go into the banner screen, which is SFASCRE, and to make some of the course overrides. We know that a lot of the colleges provided feedback to Eric and Ellen, and we continue to work with those colleges and those points of contact. We would certainly urge you that if you're still looking at these, or if you're reviewing students and you have additional feedback, please reach out to us. I mean, we're constantly looking to improve the process. So it's not final. We're still looking for the feedback. But what we found when we were in this first snapshot in January was a little bit surprising to us. We looked at almost 22,000 students. We understand that that's not our full allotment of students. So not everyone was registered, but we ran the process on 22,000 students. And we found 651 cases of students who were impacted that weren't in degree pursuant courses and their aid was impacted. So those were sent to the advisor. Honestly, we kind of thought that number would be a little bit higher. I, for one, was really surprised that it was only about 3% of the population. So that gives some optimism in that this process maybe is not going to be quite as cumbersome as we thought it was. I mean, we know we still have work to do and that things can change and it can certainly go up or down. But for now, that's a really good number. So 651 out of nearly 22,000 students. And here's the thing to remember with those 651 students. Those are communications that we're sending to you guys. We think the vast majority of them could probably be exceptions could be made in Banner that a student would never get the communication on that if you made the exception. So you got these students, you went to this screen, somebody from the college went to this screen, which is of course, our student course evaluation audit screen. And this is the screen that the point of contact or the advisor will make the exceptions. So when we start sending these communications out and you guys pull the student up, this is what you're going to see. You'll see count for aid. Yes. Counting program. Yes or no. And then preserve override. So if you look at the fourth one down, which is biology 113 in this example, this course originally did not count in the student's audit. So it wasn't counting as a degree percent course. It was overridden in the system as indicated by the check mark. And then we want, as we've communicated before, this is where you would make the comment. So the person at the college is making the decision to override this can do so. The only thing you have to do is you have to put a comment in. So you have to tell us why that counts. We'd like you to be a little bit detailed. I mean, you don't have to write a novel, but made an exception for a GEF or counted as a degree, as a major course, as an exception for another science course. Something of that nature, so that when we do come up on the audit trail in a few years and auditors are asking why we made this exception for this student, we've got your words there and it's an easy answer. The other thing I want to point out on this screen is if you look at you see the blue box at the top, and then you have the term and the student ID and name. Right beside that says view current, that box. Right now it's unchecked. With that box, what we want you to know is if you're looking at this student and you've got one of the students who has a habit of changing courses and maybe they've been through the CPoS process 3 or 4 or 5 times, and they might have 6 or 8 or 10 or 12 courses in there for this schedule or for the term, some that they've dropped, some that they've added. If you want to look at only the current current courses that are in there that they're being considered for on the course program of study, check that box that says view current, and then that will bring up only the current ones. You can evaluate course program and study. If you make the changes, you save the changes at the box that says evaluate course program and study. All that's going to do is run it again. The one thing about that, what we will tell you is that Ellen runs this process regularly in the office, and if someone runs it after that, if she's one of them that runs it after that, it'll override whatever you've ran in here. But if the student is in 12 degree percent courses through the exceptions and the program reads that, then that pretty much ends the communications. If they go back and change courses and we run it again because we are looking for changes, then that would send out an additional communication. You would have to look at that student again, but hopefully that doesn't happen too often. So yes, again, just make sure that you save the screen and then you have the option to update that. So now we're going to talk a little bit about the advisor and student communications. And as I've said, we've changed this. We had a group that started meeting after our last set of presentations, and we really started talking about the communications. We got our communications expert, Nicole Solomon, involved, and she's the one responsible for sending out a lot of the communications, well, for all of the communications to student financial services, and she was able to kind of lead and collaborate with Ellen and Eric and some others, and scaling these communications down some, and kind of piggybacking maybe on some of the other communications that we do, or at least mirroring some of those communications so that we're not standing out too much. One of the first things that we were asked when we first came out, and we talked about a process of sending you guys a report like on Monday or Tuesday and expecting a return from you on Friday within a couple of days, was that initially in the semester when students start registering, that could be cumbersome on your part. So what we did was we, in the initial part of registration, and this initial communication will be sent to you guys on March 22nd. We know that students start registering, some cohorts start registering on the 16th, and then we have students registering that full week. So on Monday, March 22nd, for all the students who have registered up to that point, we're going to send you this first communication. And we're going to send, at that point, we're going to ask you to review those students and make exceptions when you can, but we're going to give you 10 days to review those, report on those students. So any student who's impacted with their aid, you're going to have almost 2 full weeks. We're going to send a report out on Monday. We're going to ask you by Thursday of the following week to have that completed and sent back to us and made the changes in there, so that when we run the CPoS report on that following Thursday, 10 days later, that those students who've had exceptions made, that it won't show up on the report. We're going to do that on March 22nd, and we're going to do it, and you're going to have 10 days. We're going to send out another report for the students that registered the second week on March 29th. You'll have 10 days to review those groups as well. So even though we're sending during the initial weeks, even though we're sending a report to the college every week, it's going to be a different report. It's only going to pick up the students that have registered up to that point and or have made changes. So you'll still have 10 days to review them. We're going to do that again through April the 5th. So students, again, that are degree pursuant status after 10 days that you've made the override, no further communication. At this point, the communication that would go out to the students is that for those students who you were not able to make an exception for, at that point, they will receive a second set of or they'll receive their initial communications. And that's going to be the timeline. So March 22nd, we're going to start, and we're going to run that on this 2-week process through May 3rd. On May 3rd, we're still going to continue to send the reports out, but we're going to be running them on new registration and changes. Hopefully by that point, the bulk of the students have registered. And at that point, we're going to start sending them out on Monday. We're going to ask you to make those overrides by Friday. So hopefully, the thousands of students that have registered, of the hundreds that we have that require communication, by this point, we're down to a trickle, and we're not sending out 300 students in a week. Maybe we're sending 20 or 30 or 40 students in a week. And we're going to ask you guys to get those reports, to get those exceptions done and completed by Thursday. And then we'll run the process again on Friday, and it's going to continue like that every week. So Ellen's going to run CPoS pretty much every day. Maybe during the summer, it might trickle down a little bit. We're not sure, but pretty much we're going to run it every day. We'll send these communications out to you guys weekly, and we're going to do this until the last part of term, until the last ad drop date in the last part of term, which we think is probably going to be in October. We haven't got an exact date yet. Once we get that, we'll update our communications, but we're going to run this until the last part of term goes, the ad drop date, so that we make sure we get every student. So if there's one student who maybe had to drop early in September in a course, or had a course canceled or whatever, and the only course that they can get is in a last module, we want to make sure that we get every student. So this is our communication process. We've talked to you guys about this in the past. We want to give you a little bit of an example. The first general notice that's going to go out to students, and this is subject to change, obviously, but the first general notice that's going to go out to students is just letting them know that that now they're going to start incurring enrollment standards for aid. Some students are familiar with this, but the vast majority of the students across campuses are not. They don't understand that, they have to be in degree pursuant courses, or they're not sure that what those enrollment standards are for their aid, but we're going to tell them, and it's just a general notification. It's going to include a link to our enrollment standards web page. We're going to tell them to contact the hub if they have any help or if they have any questions. We would prefer that they do it in a ticket form instead of clouding up the phones. And we know we'll get some communications from them for this. They'll read this and they'll say that, if I'm not, what counts as degree pursuant? That'll probably be the biggest question. Well, how do I know if it counts in degree pursuant? As we go through, we'll work with them. We'll direct them to their advisors to make sure that they're in degree pursuant courses. You guys are the experts on telling them what those are, and I'm sure you have other communications outside of them in your office of letting them know what those are. But basically, this is just a communication, letting them know that change is coming. Hopefully, it doesn't create too much communication or hubbub across the campus, but we know that it's going to cause a little bit. The notification to the advisors. So this is when we say the advisor, the point of contact at the college. This is the one that you're going to get starting March 22nd. We're going to tell you we're reaching out because the student schedule indicates that one or more of their courses does not count toward federal or state aid eligibility and may put them at risk. And it impacts their aid, basically. If it doesn't impact their aid, you're not going to get a communication. This is going to be the communication that you're going to get. And we're just going to ask you to please ensure that schedules are reviewed within 10 business days. Later on, that'll change to 3 business days, but for now, for 10 business days, so that students can make adjustments as necessary. This is an example of the report, and this is the one we sent out to you guys in late January. It's just going to, I mean, it's basically going to be an Excel spreadsheet. It's going to list the student if they're in multiple courses, as this example does with Cheryl Jones at the top. If there are multiple courses that are not degree pursuant and doesn't count toward aid, we're going to tell you that. We're going to ask you to review their courses at the time. That's when you go to the banner screen and you make the override, you review their courses. And if you can review the course, then everything's hunky-dory, and that's the end of the communication. We won't send anything else to you. We won't send anything to the student. If you can't make that change, so if you've got a student, you got a biology major that's just bent on taking a religious studies course, and it's maybe part of a minor, which doesn't count in degree percent courses, or it's just a one-off course that they just want to take for their own fulfillment, and they can't make a change, at that point they would get notification. And basically it would be like, hey, one of your courses doesn't count toward degree percent courses. And we explain all that to them. We tell them if they're not planning on taking full-time coursework this semester, or if they're part of other cohorts that could have some other additional requirements, such as a veteran or an athlete, to visit our website, take a look at it. But this is basically communication to them, letting them know that their aid is impacted, they're not in full-time degree pursuit courses, and we're going to ask them to get in contact with you to make a change, to do what they need to make sure that it's done. If that's done and everything is then becomes degree pursuant courses, we will send a follow-up message to them, letting them know that, hey, your updated schedule has been reviewed. You've reached full-time status in your degree pursuant coursework, and your eligibility is secured. Obviously, at some point, we're going to tell them in there that if you make additional changes to your aid, that it could be impacted. So talk to your advisor before you make any changes. And we think that with this communication process, we kind of minimize it so that we're not sending out multiple communications to students. And we know that they don't always read everything they get. So we really want to kind of make sure that, that what we are sending them is read and understood, and that they're working with the appropriate personnel to get on track. So one of the questions that we've been asked is what kind of aid is impacted. And so we've put this together, and this is going to be on the website. And this is not all encompassing, but this is a lot of the major aid, that the majority of the aid that we do process. So this is the impact. For full-time students who in program hours, less than full-time students in program hours. So if they're not in 12% course hours, their Pell Grant can be impacted. It's proportionate to the enrollment hours, and will go all the way down to 3 hours. If they're enrolled in 3 hours, they're eligible for 3 hours based on their expected family contribution and some other matrix. They can be eligible for Pell Grant, but it is proportionate. Promise Scholarship does require full-time enrollment. Now, we understand that there are some very few cases where there's discussion about whether a student cannot get in 12% course hours. We do know that the state continues to work on that. We don't have a final answer on that yet. Hopefully, the state will make a decision soon. But for now, it is the process. They have to be in 12% course hours to be eligible for the Promise Scholarship, for the Western Higher Education Grant, for the Engineering, Science, and Technology Grant, for the Underwood Smith Teach Scholarship. It does impact the HEAPS grant, because if a student's enrolled in 9 hours, but only 6 are degree pursuant, then they're only eligible for the HEAPS award for the 6 degree pursuant hours. And then for the Teach grant, some of the programs that are less than half time, if a student's getting federal student loans or Parent Plus loans, they do have to be enrolled in half-time hours. So if they're enrolled in 6 hours, only 3 are degree pursuant, then that impacts their rate. And so it can impact their ability to get the loans. Again, the Pell Grant is proportionate. The Supplemental Educational Opportunity Grant requires half-time enrollment, as does the Teach grant. So we're telling the students that if they're not in these hours, this is how it impacts that aid. And again, that'll be on our website. This is we talked about the website. Nicole and her team has really done a really good job of putting it together. And hopefully soon we'll have it up, and well, not hopefully, it'll be up and running soon, because we are going to go live here and less than about 3 weeks. But this is just a snapshot of it. So we've got a lot of information on the website. We talk about full-time enrollment and some of the different links in here, definitions, frequently asked questions, CPoS info for faculty and staff. But one of the things we talk about is the enrollment standards. And so we explain to the students what full-time is, three-quarter, half-time, less than half-time, the hours required for that, both fall and spring and in the summer. And then we talk on the other side about the aid that's impacted. So for a federal graduate plus line, they have to be at least half-time. We tell them that. So we do tell them at the top, and we want to reiterate this again, institutional scholarships and grants are not part of course program of study. So they're not going to be impacted by that. Those will still be impacted by the current requirements for those scholarships and grants. So the student should see the information on that, their start count, but otherwise it's not going to be impacted. But we try to go down the list for the programs that we administer most. We really try to address all of these, and this is available on the website. As are the student FAQs and the advisor FAQs. And some of the presentations we've been asked if you guys could maybe get a 1-page to put on your desk or something like that. We kind of balked at that a little bit because in our world, financial aid, there are changes frequently, and what we didn't want to have happen is maybe someone print off a 1-pager, stick it up on a wall, and then we get into another term and it's dated. So you could potentially be giving out information by putting it on the website. This is going to be the most up-to-date information, and we'll update them as new information becomes available. So an example of that is right now we know that Promise requires X amount of hours to be or full-time enrollment to receive the Promise. If the state were to make a change and say, okay, we're going to take other considerations into consideration, which is years down the road because it is coded in law, so they can't just make a change. But if something like that were to happen, we would make the update here in our frequently asked questions, and that will be on the website. This is probably the best information that we had come out. When we came to you guys, one of the things that it started in our first meeting, I think, with class was, we were educated in student financial services that many students have prerequisites because they can't get into a certain course. The example that I think we've used the most is biology or calculus, requires a prerequisite grade, either testing in through the SAT or through the university test that is given to the students. And if they can't test into calculus, then they have to have a grade in a lower level math class. And that's a prerequisite. What we found was that initially we told you guys, no, that's not eligible for Title IV aid. It's very clear in the aid that we could not pay for that. And that created some consternation among everyone we told this to. And we told you we would look for additional flexibility. Well, we found that. So what we did was we found that if a prerequisite that must be completed before enrolling in a course that is required for a student's program, such as that math class to get into calculus, then we can consider that remedial. Federal regulations allow for up to 30 remedial hours a year, or not a year, up to 30 remedial hours in a student's time at the university. So we can pay for up to 30 remedial hours of coursework. And if that prerequisite fits into that 30 credit hours, then we can pay for the aid, as long as those conditions are met. And we can count that in the enrollment status for determining aid eligibility. So that takes out, I know some of the programs had some of those courses scribed into their programs, but for some that don't, I think allotting classes is an example, but some of the other colleges as well. If a student's not able to get into that higher level course and they have to take a prerequisite to get into it, because of the way the federal regulations look at that, we can define that as a remedial course and pay for that with aid. And it does become a degree pursuit course. Let me see. There we go. When we were remote last March, and this SFS group first met, there was discussion about whether course program of study would be delayed. Sandra made it very clear early that for the time being, that we were going to continue on the same timeline. We weren't going to delay it. We felt like we had done far too much work and come too far to take a pause. There are still issues. We know this, not as many as we thought, but she's been adamant that we were going to continue this for the fall of 2021, and we're on course. I mean, we're there. We're ready to start. So today's February 22nd, 23rd. We're 3 weeks away. I mean, students are going to start registering on March 16th, and we're ready to start running CPoS. We're ready to start sending out reports to you guys. We continue to look at the programs. We continue to look at our communications. We continue to do testing. But the internal processes, we've already started a lot of those. The one thing we do want you to know is that even though we said we'd come to you three guys and talk to you guys and we would put it in, we're not done. We're going to come back in September and we're going to discuss this more. And we're going to talk about what's working, what's not working. We certainly want your feedback. We certainly want your input because this is for the student. We're doing this largely, we have to. It's been a regulation since 1965. So it's a nice 55 years young that we have to do this. But we are going to start seeing auditors asking for this information in a few years. We know this. We know this from Hep C that they're going to start looking into this. So we're on track. And I can tell you guys from meetings throughout the state, not only are we on track to implement this, I think we're in better position than some of the schools that we've talked to when they implemented it. And we're also leading the state. I know I was in a meeting with some folks from Marshall and Concord and a few others back in November, and they were just then starting to talk to their colleges. So we were working on our phase 3 communications and getting ready to come back to you guys, and they were just starting the process. So we're well on our way. And with that, we'll go ahead and open it up for questions. And we've got a lot of experts here, so please feel free. I mean, unmute yourself, throw it in chat if you want to, but jump in and ask us all the questions you have.
Hey, Eric, this is Greg Goodwin. Hey, would you be able to go back to the communication emails? I think it was the second to last one that was sent to a student. Yeah, so the one before, I think it's that one right there. Well, let me see.
That's a general notice.
Okay.
So that's just a general notice.
Yeah. So my question, there was one of the communications, like one of the last lines said something to the effect of, if you do wish to be in courses that are degree pursuant, to reach out to your advisor.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right here.
Okay. So I guess my question to be, that line right there makes it, to me, it makes, well, for students, I think it would make it appear that if you're not, an advisor can fix it. And we're not always going to be able to do that. So I guess, what would be the, I mean, obviously, we can tell students this, and we can tell them, listen, you don't have anything else left that's degree pursuant, so you're going to have to, potentially pay out of pocket. What would be the next step? Would it be for them to then reach back out to the hub about alternative private loan funding, or what would be what would be the recommendation for advisors at that point? If we can't get them, like, especially if they're in their last semester and they only have 3 classes remaining, which I know is going to happen with some students next spring with mine, just because they had so much AP and dual enrollment credit that came in that filled up all their electives, essentially before they even got here to WVU. So
yeah,
what would be the recommendation for advisors to tell students at that point?
Well, I mean, from the hub standpoint, if they call us and ask about degree pursuant courses, we have no choice but to send them to you guys, because we just don't know. So if you get to that point where you can't, and we've talked about this, I think, in a lot of the college meetings, and I'll certainly ask Misty or May or one of those to chime in, but we're just going to, once it gets to the point that they cannot be in any more degree pursuant courses, then the communication from us is going to be, here's what we can package you for. Now, we will certainly tell them their options. An example I'll use is if they're a senior student and 8 hours and they have promise, there are an appeal process that they can get the promise through the end of their career. So seniors do have that option in your last year, similar to the institutional scholarships. If we can't get them in degree pursuant hours and they don't have aid to pay for it, then we would certainly encourage them to work with private lenders. We would give them their options for a tuition payment plan. So I think the students that it's most going to impact is the one that can maybe only get in 3 degree pursuant courses, but maybe they want to take 9 to finish a minor. That's one of the situations I've heard. We'll give them their options. You can use a tuition payment plan. These are the private lenders. We do have a website for private loans. And to my knowledge, most of the private lenders we deal with, this is not a requirement. This is not on their radar yet. Even the ones that, like SAP's an issue. Some private loans will pay for SAP, others don't. So they may have some limited options, but we will direct them to whatever options they have on a case-by-case basis.
Okay, thank you.
That answer your question?
It sure does. Yeah, thanks, Aaron.
Yeah. So, I mean, we certainly don't expect, we're not going to advise them on the courses that they need to take. And if you guys have questions about aid, certainly direct them to us and we'll do the best that we can with them. And we got a lot of wonderful people down there that will do everything they can for them. So. Other questions?
We've had a question in the chat earlier regarding, can advisors have access to these systems you mentioned now so that we can at least look or test it before it is launched? And the answer, Eric, do you want to share the answer?
Yeah, so in terms of the getting access to that banner screen, we're giving the colleges the ability to decide who has access to that screen. Some colleges want many people to have access to it. Some of them would rather streamline that. So we're giving that access or that decision to the colleges. And so if a college has decided to give an advisor access to that screen, then they can request access to it now. We did send instructions to the points of contact. So they do have those instructions on how to request access, or you can request instructions from us or someone in the registrar's office. We can get that to you. But yeah, you can certainly, if you're someone that does need access to that screen, or the college is determined that you need access, then you can request access now and go in and look at that in the current setup, because we don't have CPoS turned on for spring. So if you make changes, it's not going to impact their aid right now.
Great, thanks, Eric. We also have another question from Penny Lipscomb in the our office for our veterans or those that receive veterans benefits. And the example is for students receiving benefits, they only need 1 degree pursuant course in their last semester. The VA also counts all prerequisites as degree pursuant with no max credit limit. So I'm assuming she is wondering if that detail is on the FAQs for students. Penny, is that what you're getting to?
Right. I just want to know if you have any information in there for our VA students, because obviously they'll get the full benefit through the VA, just not through financial aid.
I think, Penny, we've talked about that internally, and we came to the conclusion that we need to meet with you guys and have an independent meeting. We want some information to put on our website from you, and we have some information that we feel needs to go on your website for your students. In this situation here, so, I mean, you guys, we can only, the prerequisites that we count as remedial, we can only allow 30 hours of that. Now, we don't know exactly how we're going to do that. It's going to require input from the advisors and from the registrar, but once they reach that 30-hour limit, we can't pay beyond that. Now, honestly, I don't know that we're going to see a lot of students meet that 30-hour requirement, but still, it's going to happen. The one that I was aware of is that in the veterans final semester, they just have to have the 1 degree pursuant course, correct? For aid, for their
Right
program.
now, Currently, yes.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, for federal aid, I mean, so if we had a veteran student that had went through a group course and they were only, if the advisor told us they only had 6 hours remaining, we could have only packaged them for 6 hours. And that's going to continue for the aid. Um, um, we can't change the regulations. So I will tell you that we have internally discussed having a meeting between SFS and veterans. And I think that that's something that we should probably do, just from where I worked with veterans before, to make sure that we completely understand what you guys are doing, you completely understand what we're doing, but more importantly, that not only in our FAQs, but in your website as well, that we're getting this information out to the students. So if you guys are open to this meeting, we can set it up in the next week or two.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So we'll reach out to you. It looks like Greg added something, maybe adding the words "if able" at the end of the letter. We can do something like, we're certainly open to that, Greg. Again, any suggestions that you guys have, read through these communications. This why we put on their subject to change, because we know that we come at it from the perspective of our world. And if it's something that's going to help you guys, we're open to that. So yeah, send us I think we have someone on here taking notes. We'll certainly put this down, but if you have suggestions like that, if any of you have suggestions like that, certainly flood Eric's email with these suggestions. He's happy to address them, but you can send them to anyone on the team. You can send them to Eric or Ellen or to Terry, to myself. We'll make sure that we get to the right people. So is there any other questions or comments? Or I'm sorry, that wasn't from Greg. That was from Katie. So yeah. But yeah, we're certainly open to that.
Misty, from the Office of the University Registrar, do you have anything to add?
Hello, everyone. The only thing I have to add, not relevant to course program of study, is I apologize that I wasn't here in the beginning. I just wanted to kind of introduce the fact, for those that didn't know, that we have done some undergraduate validation meetings on the Morgantown campus. And I don't think I have enough time to show you the full PowerPoint that I would put together today. So I'm just going to kind of give you a teaser, and then we can decide at the AAC Executive Committee if we want to just put this in video form or attach it to another meeting potentially. But what we had done is just kind of we went through each major on the Morgantown campus only at the undergraduate level, and validated the programs. And what came out of that, I guess the quick and dirty of it, is the structure of the curriculum table that translates into the catalog will be different this year. And so it is going to be broken down basically into university requirements, and then potentially college or program requirements, and then major requirements. So things haven't changed dramatically, perhaps from what the majors content is. It's just the structure in which they are listed and some potential clarifications that we could really highlight within the catalog and make sure that they're being enforced in degree works. Were kind of evaluated and made sure that we could clear those items up. So maybe when we have some more time, Jen, we can go into those details. But I think to give you the full scope, I need a little bit more time. But we will definitely keep you all apprised of. We just wanted to keep you apprised of that, first, that it happened, and then second, that the structure within the catalog is going to look a little bit different for you. So we can make sure we get that information out.
Thank you, Misty. So we will make sure I have that first item on our next AAC Executive Committee agenda. So I've jotted that down, and we'll discuss that. And then just everybody be on the lookout on our listserv for notification regarding how we're going to handle that, whether it be in video format or in add-on to our next workshop, or adding another workshop somewhere in our schedule. So Do we have any other questions lingering as we kind of wrap up and get to the end of our time together? Okay, I'm not seeing any. So on behalf of the AAC Executive Council, want to thank all of our colleagues who have been such a huge part of this endeavor. I know as advisors we have been eagerly awaiting this information, and I know, at least for me, I'll speak on my own behalf. Financial aid always makes me very, very nervous whenever I'm advising a student regarding their plan of study. So I do hope that this information was as helpful to you as it has been to me. And if you do have any other suggestions, concerns, or anything like that, please let the AAC know, as well as the folks from Student Financial Services, so that we can collectively work together for maximizing efficiencies in this whole process. And without any further ado, I will just ask you all to stay safe, be well, and look forward to seeing you in our next workshop. Have a great day.
Thank you.